Hi guys, Jordan here. In this video I'm basically going to explain how I became a full-time gambler and what an average day for me looks like now. When I left school at 16 I had pretty good GCSEs, but I knew that further education wasn't for me. I'd had enough. I didn't really like the whole schooling system and I had a bit of a problem with authority, didn't really like being told what to do. So I knew that I had to kind of find my own way, and I went from job to job to job to job, like most people of my age back then. I tried my hand at pretty much everything. And then when I was about 21, I found myself in a job that I hated. I was doing accounts for a sheet metal firm, and basically in the morning I'd do the accounts for them. In the afternoon I was doing manual, boring work. Basically building things out of metal. I hated this job massively. I'd come home every day depressed, miserable, didn't like it at all. One evening, flicking through TV, don't know how I ended up on about channel 820 odd, and I basically found Sky Poker TV, and I watched that, and I was like amazed. These people were playing, poker for money, and it really kind of interested me because I'd always been interested in gambling, and I was putting knackers on each weekend and that type of thing, but that was as far as my gambling went. And when I saw these people making money, I thought, oh, I want to have a go at that. So I set up a Sky Poker account, started playing, and within about 3 months, I was probably a couple of £100 down. But I'd enjoyed it. I was loving it. I was playing basically every single night. It was kind of getting me through work because I hated my job, hated kind of everything that I was doing. But I'd come home and I'd play poker, and that would take my mind off it. Now, after about 3-4 months of doing that, virtually every evening, it got to the point where I was bored of losing. I want to start winning. The enjoyment's starting to go. So I just kind of started reading articles, watching YouTube videos, just on how to play poker tournaments, basic strategy. And I was only playing £1-2 tournaments each evening. It was no big deal if I did lose. But after about 3 or 4 months, I started to kind of break even. And then another 3-4 months, I started to make a little bit of profit. Every now and again, I was winning like £100-200 from a tournament. And that's kind of how I went for about 12 months. And then, I'd saved up about £3,000. Some of that was from work, some of that was from just from poker winnings. And my boss kind of told me I was getting cut at work, and I hated this job massively. I hated my boss. He was a proper knob, and I just said, you know what, I'm quitting. And in my head, I just decided I'm going to make it work as a poker player. That was what I was going to do. So that's what I did. From that day, I never went back to work. Never even done my last 2 weeks as I'd kind of promised I would. I just revised, watched videos, did everything, and started playing poker. And if I was, looking back and advising myself now, I would say that £3,000 was nowhere near enough to attempt to go professional, because you need to be able to handle big losses. You need to be able to handle bad runs. And I was very lucky not to go broke, so I had bills to pay like everyone. And I think after about 3 or 4 months, I was down to about 500 quid. So it weren't going great. But luckily, I had a big win, pretty much, at a point where I was thinking about signing on, thinking about getting a new job. And I won about £1.5 and that kind of saw me through for a month. And then a couple of days later, I had another win for £1. A couple of days later, another win. And it got to a point that, 2 months later, I'd got myself about £5,000 in savings. So I was all right. And then that kind of saw me on my way. And I kind of learnt from that, nearly going broke, that, I've got to be careful with my money. I've got to be sensible. I've got to be committed to this, and I've got to be better than everyone else that's playing. So that's kind of what I did. And, over about 2 or 3 years, I was making maybe £30,000 a year, absolutely loving life. But every year I was playing, it was getting harder. So I had to revise more. I had to commit more time. I had to, be better than everyone else. And everyone else was getting better because, there's YouTube now. There's all sorts of articles online. And there's so many tips and tricks and help out there for poker players. So that's when I kind of thought, well, I need to look for another revenue stream. And that's when kind of sports betting came in. I've always loved sport. I've played football my whole life. Pretty much I'll watch any sport there is. But betting on it, for me was just accas on a Saturday, or occasional bet on West Ham to win when we weren't expected to, just for a bit of fun. And I'd kind of spoke to a lot of other professional poker players, and they all kind of were in the gambling industry. Some of them worked part-time for betting firms and done other bits. And I looked at what they did basically and tried to take in as much information as I could. And I started out betting on golf. Now I liked golf because when you're betting on it, they were all pretty much big prices. Like you're betting on an 80 to 1 shot in the golf, it's got a chance of winning. Whereas an 80 to 1 shot in the football, pretty much a no-hoper. So I like the attraction of big prices. And there was so much information out there, like on the PGA website and European Tour website, so much stats, data that you can absorb and you can use to your advantage, basically. And that's what I've always loved. I've always been into stats, figures, numbers. Like maths was something I've always been good at. You know, the writing side of things I've never really excelled at, but the math side of everything have been fine. So when it comes to crunching numbers and, you know, seeing what players do well on what courses and what it takes to win on certain courses, I loved. And for about 18 months, I mainly bet on golf more than football, purely because that's where my skill set was better served. And then, you know, I was showing, you know, a decent profit, and I was posting on my personal Twitter page, you know, a couple of times a month. Had a few big winners. I think one year I had 3 of the 4 major winners, you know, like, you know, 25 to 1, 50 to 1, 80 to 1 prices. So it was all going pretty well, but I always preferred football, and I was still only doing like muggy yakkers like everyone else. And this is when I decided, you know, I'm going to try and take my skill set from golf betting and try and implement it with football, because there was a new wave of stats-based bets out there now. People started doing, you know, the bookings bets, and there was now shots bets, and now there's tackles bets, and there's all these type of bets that they just weren't around a few years ago, so you couldn't use stats and data to your advantage. So now that's kind of where I spend most of my time, you know, just crunching numbers, crunching data. If I'm football betting, I'm looking at how many shots a team's had, how many shots on target they average, how many cards this ref has, any sort of data I can find that I can use to my advantage. Now, certain games I will just look at and think, you know, that game's good for cards, that game's good for tackles, that game. Just because I've looked at numbers over and over again, week in, week out for years, it's kind of, most of the numbers are in my head somewhere, I just kind of need to refresh myself. So that's what I find myself doing these days. Every day, get up, check my emails, you know, have something to eat, get a bit of exercise, which I think is really important, because, you know, when you've not got to get up and go to work, when you've not got to do this, it's so hard to make yourself do something physical. And I found myself in a bit of a hole. Like my first 2-3 years playing poker, I didn't do anything physical at all. And I was lucky that I've never been one to put on weight easily or anything like that, but I became so unfit and, you know, so unhealthy, and my concentration was terrible because, you know, I'd gone from playing football 5 nights a week to doing absolutely nothing. So now I'm kind of in a routine where I get a bit of exercise. I've never been a gym person, but, you know, I'd fully recommend anyone who does like going to the gym to do that. But I just do a bit of walking. Half an hour a day is good enough for me. Sometimes go out on a bike, something like that. And that kind of clears my head. So then I can spend, you know, 2 hours a day maybe looking at the football for the next 2 or 3 days. I try not to always look on the day, because by that time some of the prices are gone. So you always want to be looking a day ahead if possible. So that's what I try and do. And I'll spend as much time crunching the numbers, and then I'll compare them numbers to the prices, and then find which prices I think stand out most, you know, have got a higher probability of coming in, as opposed to the odds provided. And that's where we'll find our value. So that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis. I'm still playing poker, and I still supplement my income through poker. And I don't think I would be doing this full-time without the poker as well. So if anyone was ever thinking of becoming a full-time gambler, even if you've got thousands in the bank, I would still recommend doing something else part-time, whether that's within the gambling industry or, you know, a part-time job as well. Definitely recommend that, just for your mental health as much as anything. It's good to have not all your eggs in one basket. So yeah, that's kind of what I do on a day-to-day basis now. It's literally get up, revise, look for bets, post bets, hope they win. And then I'm playing poker pretty much 3 or 4 nights a week as well, from about maybe 7 in the evening through to about 1 in the morning. So I do put in long hours. It's not an easy life. I probably put in the same amount of hours, often more hours than, you know, someone in a 9-to-5 job. But I'm aware the luxuries are that I can pick my own hours, I can take time off when I want. And there's certainly a load of good aspects from it, but it's definitely not something I would recommend for people just jumping in out of nowhere, thinking they can do it, because that's how I started off. I'd had enough of my job, and I kind of jumped into this industry, not really knowing what I was doing, just taking a punt. And I got lucky that it kind of worked out for me in the end, but I should have been a lot more, I should have played it a lot safer and saved up a lot more money beforehand. But yeah, this is how I kind of got into gambling. This is kind of how my day-to-day is now. And if anyone has any questions or comments or anything, feel free to leave me a message on here and I'll reply, or drop me a DM if it's something personal that you want help or advice with, and I'll do my best to reply. So on Twitter, I am at JJ Value Hunter. Thank you for watching.